Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. This is Laura Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good morning. It is 6 o'clock here in the morning, Calgary, Alberta, August 3rd, Wednesday, August 3rd. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. We're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. Chat room is open, and I did pop the link in Robert Burney's webpage is there, www.joy2meu.com. That's joy, J-O-Y, the number 2, meu.com. And Robert Burney, he's a codependence counselor. He's a codependence therapist, a grief counselor. He's an author. He's written a book called Codependence: The Dance of Wounded Souls, and a spiritual teacher, and that's what we're working on. I've been looking at this for at least nearly 3 months now, at least 2.5. And so, hopefully people are getting something out of it. I know I am, and it's helpful for me. So looking at the inner child work and the inner child healing, which is exactly what I'm doing. And so I find this information very helpful. So hopefully everybody is getting something out of this too, and I appreciate everybody tuning in. I'm not a counselor, I'm not a therapist. I'm just a private citizen paying to do these shows here on Blog Talk Radio. And you have to listen at your own discretion to all of my shows, because I'm talking about abuse, and abuse is a sensitive subject, and many people may find that the material just bothers them, and it may trigger survivors if you're just starting out on your healing journey, and you're just starting out and haven't done a whole lot of work and haven't got very far through. This type of material can definitely trigger people, and you have to be careful what you're listening to. And other people, it just could be disturbing. So you need to be aware that I'm talking about abuse. I don't sugarcoat it. I don't minimize it. I just tell it like it is. And it's traumatizing. It's horrific. So you need to be careful what you're listening to. Make sure that that you make the right choice for yourself. And if you find, if you feel like it's just going to bother you, then you just turn the show off, because you won't be hurting my feelings, right? And young people under the age of 18, I just ask that you have permission to listen to my show, because there's a lot of adult content on my shows, and I think that young people be protected at all times, and so you should know that this is really a show for adults, and it's about stopping child abuse. It's about the issues surrounding child abuse, but there's a whole lot of adult material on my shows, so you need to have an adult listen to the show with you, and they can help you make a decision whether you should be listening. So thanks, everybody. I appreciate it. We'll just get right into this. I'm really, 3/4 of the way down the page, looking at spiritual integration. Robert Burney is talking about spiritual integration. This is the second article or second webpage that he has devoted to inner child recovery. And so this is the spiritual integration part of what he's talking about. And yesterday we were looking at, he says the term dysfunctional here in the sense that an individual does not feel honored, respected, and connected to the whole in a way that promotes happiness and fulfillment. And he says it's very helpful to have a spiritual belief system that allows for the possibility that some kind of cosmic order exists, that there is in fact some meaning and purpose for human life, a belief system that affords the individual being dignity and respect, and promotes the possibility that there is a connection between the individual and the whole that makes some sense. So I like what he said there, and that's what we were talking about yesterday. And he says codependence is on one level a defense system wherein we take ego credit if things in our life go the way we want them to, and if they do not, we blame somebody or something. Because we were taught that doing life right would lead to happily ever after, we think that something is wrong with us because we don't feel fulfilled and happy. So we blame others or the system or fate or whatever to help ourselves try to overcome the deep-seated feeling that there is something wrong with us. So he says codependence is a defense system that developed in reaction to a basic belief that being human was shameful or negative in some way. It's kind of interesting. It's an interesting way to look at it, because I know, I looked at Hope for Us. She's got some web pages called Hope for Survivors, and that's Hope, H-O-P, the number 4 survivors, and she's .com, and she's got some great information there, mainly talking about John Bradshaw's book, Healing the Shame That Binds You. And I haven't read that book, but of just the excerpts from the book and what she was talking about was really quite interesting. And Robert Burney has a little, he just kind of goes a little bit more on the spiritual side of things, and he's almost taking more of a whole look at the whole picture than almost a personal level. And so, it's quite interesting just to see what Robert Burney has to say, and I like what he has to say. I mean, I think that's very true, because I know, where he says, if things are going the way that we want them to, then everything's great. And we take credit for it and say, yeah, everything's going great. But if things don't go the way we want them to, then we'll blame somebody or blame something. And so, not realizing that this is a human experience, and that not everything is going to go the way that we want it to. And that's the reality, right? And so it is interesting because I know that many times, I mean, I even do it myself, I'm sure, but, and I do, and I've said it yesterday that, I blame my parents for the multitude of my behaviors. And I mean, to be honest with you, I think that there is some truth in that. But the issue is I can't blame them really for things such as, me treating people badly right now. Let's just say, I was a horrible person and I was just treating people badly, and everybody in my life in relationships and whatnot. I mean, people could say, well, look at the upbringing that I had, maybe that's what causes me to be this way. I mean, we have to be responsible for our actions. We have to be responsible for what we do. You know what I mean? We can't go around blaming people for that, and I think that's where, I was able to not take on the guilt and shame from my mother, especially the abuse that I took from her, because she was always blaming somebody else. Like, she would never take responsibility for what she was doing, what she had done, right? Because she was a victim, see. So my mother was always playing the victim role, and it was like, well, it's never her fault, I mean, it was always, well, I had a rotten childhood, and that's why I can't cope, and and I'm living with this horrible man, and my dad, right? And he's abusing me, and it's all his fault. And I told him not to abuse the children, and yet he's abusing the children. He always did abuse the children, and he was hurting the boys, and he was hurt, and all this stuff would come from her mouth, like throughout the years, right? And it was never her fault, and she would never ever take responsibility for her own life, first of all, and her own health and happiness. She was very much a martyr and a victim, and it's and narcissistic, a whole lot of problems and issues. And the thing is, she would never just stand up and say, look, I'm responsible for a portion of this, because I'm in it and I'm actually creating, helping to create this horrible existence for us, because she was. And so, even taking that part of the responsibility on. But see, a lot of times people won't do that, and I mean, like, she was never going to admit that she abused the kids, right? And she was really one of the main people. Her and my dad shared that responsibility. I mean, she was my main abuser, but she wasn't necessarily my brother's main abusers. My dad was definitely my brother's main abusers, but for me, it was my mother, right? And so, she would never ever take that responsibility and take off. Of course not, right? She doesn't want to sit there and say, oh yeah, I just beat the shit out of my daughter. I treat her like crap. I make her feel like she should be dead, right? And of course, she was never going to take responsibility on for that. And I couldn't expect her to. But the thing is it's a reality. She was responsible for that, and she was always blaming somebody else. Oh, woe is me, sort of thing. And she had the choice to treat me properly. She had the choice to, even if she couldn't fully, love me the way that she should have, or treat me with any kind of respect or dignity, she could have tried. She could have tried. She could have put a little bit of a better effort in there, you know what I mean? Because she just kind of took advantage of the fact that I was her punching bag, you know what I mean? And I was just the person, this little dog that she could just kick around when she was mad, She didn't even have to be mad at me. She could be mad at the world. She could be mad at my dad. She could be mad at anybody, and she would take it out on me. I was just a convenient way for her to rid her, or to get some of her anger out. And I mean, that's so incredibly wrong to do to a child, And so, because I loved my mom, right? So of course it hurt, and it always has, and it always will. And but yeah, I mean, just she just felt like her life was so miserable, and it was. That's the reality. So she was actually spot on, when she was saying that. She was like, this life is horrible. That's why she was always talking about killing herself, and she was just a miserable mess, and she could only be happy in certain periods of time, like if somebody invited her to coffee, because she had neighbor friends who really liked her. She was actually a very interesting person, and outside of the abuse and the mess, my mother was an awesome person. That's the whole problem. Like, she could be a very good person. She was good to other people. She was good to other people's children. As a matter of fact, you'd never catch her, beating on somebody else's child. She loved kids, right? She hated her own kids. That's the problem. So I used to see her treating these other little kids around the neighborhood like gold, right? And then later on that day, I'd catch hell for just because I was living, I was alive, right? And so that's the psychosis, She didn't see me as her daughter, as her precious gift. She just saw me as another mouth to feed, another problem, another insolent little child who was going to make her feel that she was lesser than, that she wasn't doing a good job. Because actually, I mean, when my parents got busted on child abuse charges, they were both busted. And she didn't want to look like the bad mother. See, I pieced all this together, right? Because I knew this. Like she would say, well, I'm not a bad mother. I'm not a bad person. Not like my own mother. She didn't want to be classed as an abuser like her own mother, right? Because she hated what her mother did to her. She didn't like being abused, and she didn't like seeing her siblings being abused, her younger siblings. She was the oldest, and she used to try to protect them, and she said she would take the beatings for them. She would actually make sure that, if something happened, she would take the blame for it so that my grandmother would beat on her instead of the younger kids, right? And, this is how she lived her life growing up, right? And so, like she really, like, she didn't want to look like a bad mother, right? So when the courts brought them in and they had to go to court, my mom was like pleading the judge, please, the family court said, don't take my children away. I love my children. She wanted to look like a good mother. She wanted to look like she did care about her children, right? And I mean, somewhere in there was probably a little truth to that. But the issue is that she didn't care enough to not do what she did to us, right? And so, especially me. And so, that's harsh. Like, that's a harsh reality. And so there I was in her face, really causing her a lot of guilt because she could see the damage that she had done. I mean, if she was beating on me and I was, fat lip, black eye, bruises, scratched face. She knew what she had done to me. And there I was looking at her, and she was just like, I am not a bad mother. So then she'd become angry, because she'd be like, look at this little insolent kid in front of me needing something from you, like as if I'm not doing my job, right? She had some serious issues, obviously. Anybody could treat their child like that's got some problems. And, like at the end of the road, she was very much a victim, just just blaming life, blaming everybody for her actions, right? So it was really my dad's fault that my mother was beating on me. That's what I'm trying to say, right? Like in her mind, it was my dad's fault that my mom was treating me the way that she did, or that she was. It was all his fault, and it was his fault that the whole family had gone downhill and she had no part in it, right? She would never take her part of the responsibility on, And so even at the end of the road, on her deathbed, she was just like, this life was just horrible. It was a horrible existence. And, that's really sad, to end up at the age of 68 years old on your deathbed, having lived this horror, this horror nightmare of a life, really, which is what it was. And, she could only be happy for little tiny moments away from the house where she could take her mind off of her family. She could take her mind off of the situation for a little while and talk to somebody else who didn't have anything to do with that mess, right? And so there were periods of time where she was, she could experience some happiness and some joy, right? And when I was with her at those times, it was always great because I got to see a different side of my mother that I didn't get to see around the house. It was like, wow, this is a different part of mom that we don't see around the house. Like she's kind to people. She's not crying. She's not threatening to kill herself. She's not hurting somebody. She's not hurting me. Like she did when I was real little. She used to beat the shit out of me in public, right, or at people's homes. Later, as I got older, especially right around, 16, 17, she stopped doing that. And so after that, we started to develop some type of twisted but still better relationship. And, I got to see a different side of her at that point that a lot of my siblings didn't get to see. My two brothers that were in the middle that killed themselves never got to see that part of her. They only saw the mom that wanted to kill herself. They only saw the mom that was being raped. They only saw the mom that was so unhappy, and so down and so miserable and so mean and hateful. Like my mother would throw pots of food at you. Like if you came in the kitchen, you had to be very careful. The kitchen was a dangerous place. And my mother ruled the kitchen. And you were only, like, if you were taking a chance going in there, right? Now, she wouldn't, like, beat you if you took something out of the fridge. But if she was mad and she didn't want you in the kitchen, she would throw something at you, right? Hot coffee, whatever. Cold coffee, whatever. Plates of food. If she was cooking, it was very dangerous. Didn't hang around the kitchen, because she was losing her mind. You know what I mean? Like she she felt like, oh, this is my space, and you guys don't, you don't come in here, right? This is my space, because she didn't have any space. My dad was raping her in her own bedroom. My mother used to sleep on the couch most of the time, because we were such a big family in a small house, and she wasn't sleeping with him, right? So my dad usually got a bedroom, and plus he was crazy anyway, so she was concerned that he would rape the children. I'm sure of it. I know that's what that's all about. So, she made sure he had his own bedroom, right? And then all the kids would split up the other bedrooms, boys in one room and girls in another, and then my mother would end up on the couch, right? But sometimes there'd be a little tiny little room for her somewhere, and sometimes she would have a bed, right, throughout life, right? And she was, it was just a horrible existence for her, and wherever she was being raped by my dad, right? So it didn't matter whether she had her own room or whether she was on the couch, right? So that's the whole issue. And this is absolutely, horrific. You know what I mean? And the issue is here's this woman at the end of the road saying, look at this horrible, horrible existence, and it was. It absolutely was. But my brothers never got to see that other side of her that I got to see, which was a little bit, as much as at the end of the road did it really pay off or help. It was good that I got to see that, for sure. The feelings that I have towards her will never change. You know what I mean? Like and sadly enough, you know what I mean? It's just a reality that, I can't condone abuse. So I can't condone what she did, and I cannot condone what my dad did. I can't condone what my brother did. I really cannot allow myself to say, oh, it's okay. Because that's what my family does. My sister's like, oh, but Mom used to make cookies. That's her favorite line. And, because my mom did make a lot of cookies. Like, she baked cookies all the time. And that was her sanity factor, right? She baked cookies. And so my mother was always baking cookies. And so that's one thing that my sister likes to remember. So she shuts out everything else and just says, oh, Mom was great. She used to make cookies. And I'm like, Mom made cookies. Sure she did. But she was also, abusive. Like, we know this. And my sister used to get beat up by her too. And I told her, I said, yeah, she made cookies. But she hurt us, and she was not happy. She was a miserable woman who caused us all a lot of grief, and a lot of horror, in my childhood. And my sister's like, yeah, but look, she used to pass the cookies out. So that's all she keeps in her memory, is that my mother made cookies, and that she was a good person because she made cookies. It's like, well, if you want to see that, whatever. But my sister's really quite well in denial. So there you go. But this is the thing. I have some memories too of my mother that don't, have anything to do with abuse. But the issue is that the damage is done, right? So that stuff doesn't go away just because I remember that my mother made cookies or handed me a $20 bill. You know what I mean? Like my mother, rarely said anything nice about me or to me. You know what I mean? I didn't have a loving relationship with her. So the fact that she made cookies and handed me a $20 bill just didn't make up for it. You know what I mean? And so, that's why I think my mother actually had a real hate on for me, because I was her living proof that she was not being a good mother. She was neglecting me. She was letting my 21-year-old brother rape me. She was beating the crap out of me. You know what I mean? Calling me names, kicking me out of the house, when I got older, about 12, 13 years old. Spitting on me, literally spitting on me, calling me names. She was a horrible, 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 horrible mother, and I was living proof that she was, because she probably looked back in her mind and see what she did to me, you know what I mean? And it was always this guilt factor, because it was like she was guilty, and so therefore we could never ever heal from that. She could never just hold me and say, I'm so sorry, and that's what I needed. I needed my mother to hold me and say, I am so sorry for what I did to you. I am so sorry. And because I knew what she was going through. So, it would have been a lot more forgivable had she done that. You know what I mean? But, my mother never, ever held me and told me that. I only heard her ever say out loud to anyone in the home that she was sorry that she beat me up. And that's because there was an episode where she actually nearly broke my nose and then continued to beat me with the belts. This beating went on for quite a while, and I was really, I told her, I said, just kill me, And my brother actually took the belt away from her, and she went in her little room that she was sleeping in, and I could hear her crying as I was in the bathroom trying to stop the blood flow because I was bleeding everywhere. And she was saying, she says, I'll never do it again, I'll never do it again. And so she knew, right? She knew. But did she come and hold me and help me to get the bleeding stopped, or tell me I'm so sorry, and hold me? No, she couldn't do that for me, right? because she couldn't take responsibility. This was somebody else's fault. Somebody else made her beat the shit out of me. Somebody else made her allow my brother to rape me, you know? It wasn't her, right? In her mind, right? It wasn't her fault. So she never took responsibility. So people will do this. They will do this. They will have these miserable lives, and they will blame somebody else, you know? And they will hurt people, and they will still blame somebody else. Oh, well, this person made me do this, or this is why I'm hurting people because it's not my fault, you know? And this is how my mother was, completely. And, you know, everybody that knows her knew that. So pretty harsh, you know what I mean? We really are the co-creators of our life. And I really like what Robert Burney says here, you know? He says codependence is on one level a defense system. See, so we just it's a defense system. We just develop it. It's a reaction to a basic belief that that doing, you know, and being human is shameful or negative in some way. So integration of some type of spiritual belief system that allows for the possibility that maybe we are not sinful and shameful. That maybe life is not about sin and punishment, but rather is about cause and effect. Is a major step in changing our relationship with life. So it is important to understand the cause and effect in our own lives, to start seeing how the patterns in our adult lives have been caused by our childhood experiences. So it's important to start looking at our lives from a perspective of understanding cause and effect instead of assessing blame. See, that's so true, and that's why I decided, you know, 4 years ago when I started looking at the situation, because I decided to allow myself to heal, right, to start my healing journey for the first time at the age of 41. And so, you know, basically what I did is I sat back for a long, long time. I had a lot of time to do it because I realized that this was going to take a long time to get over this stuff. And so I sat back and I looked at the whole thing as a third party because my emotions were too strong. Like I had so much hatred in my heart for my parents and what they did. I had so much hatred in my heart for the pain that I was suffering. You know what I mean? Internally, like inside, within my heart, inside my body, which still makes me angry. And, you know, this is the thing. It's like I had way too many high emotions about it. So I couldn't look at it in a perspective without my hatred coming in there to play. And so I thought, well, I got to look at this a little differently. I'm going to have to look at it as a third party. What happened? Like, what happened to cause me to be this way, to want to kill myself, to want to not think that life is worth living, and to keep struggling with the idea that, you know, at some point I could end it, right? Because I didn't want to kill myself. Obviously, you know, like my brother killed himself, and my other brother really did too. And so it's, you know, I mean, I knew that that's just not the way to go, right? But part of me was saying, I can't stand this pain anymore. Like, I can't take this dysfunction. I can't take this hurt, this pain anymore. So how am I going to get out of it? So that seemed like a logical thing, since my family's really well suicidal. My dad was suicidal. I mean, my dad used to try to kill himself, so there you go. And my mother was just always talking about killing herself, right? So it was just they created an option for us, right? And then, but I didn't really want to, but I thought, how am I going to get out of this pain, you know? And so I started taking a look at everything third party. And I thought, wow, I remember, you know, I totally remember what was going on. And okay, this is what happened. This is what caused my mother to be the way she was, my dad really to be the way he was. He's mentally ill. And he's got some real demons that he's never ever, gotten any help with, right? And his problem is that he's very much a sexual abuser, you know what I mean? And he's a sexual monster, right? And so he treated his wife horrible and treated his sons horrible. Was there some sexual abuse between me and him? I quite well think so. The issue is that I can't get a hold of it. You know, it's probably when I was really young. I didn't like him touching me, you know, and he's always, you know, sort of touching, like sexual touching. You know, I remember I felt very uncomfortable with him touching me. And then when I was 6 years old, he raped my mother in front of me, right? And just prior to that, I thought I saw him raping one of my brothers, which I'm pretty sure I saw him sodomizing one of my brothers. And so this is the thing, you know, my dad was a sexual monster, you bet. And so he has demons from his past because this all started in his home, right? So I took a look at this, and I thought, when he was growing up, right? I took a look at this, and I thought, you know, I mean, he had, you know, his own set of demons, right? And he's, you know, besides that, a psychotic person. He's mentally ill. He's schizophrenic, as well as having borderline personality disorder, because they diagnosed him with that years ago. And he, you know, he tries, but he's got these issues he's never really gotten any help with. And it's like, you know, he hurt his mother. He hurt my mother. He hurt his wife. Here are his children, and that's the fact. That's what. So I started to take a look at it as a third party person instead of saying, oh, I hate that evil bastard, because that's really what was going on in my mind. Was I hate that bastard, and I hate my mother, and I hate my brother, I hate what they did, and I knew like my brother had raped me, right? I just didn't want to admit it. I would say, oh, he molested me, because it's so much of a nicer word, to me, right? Because it's like it encompasses everything, in my mind. That's how I was feeling about it. A little bit of a prettier package instead of saying, he raped me, and sodomized me. It was easier for me to say molestation or sexual abuse because then I didn't have to say the words. It just and it doesn't, and that's the whole issue. Molestation, it doesn't matter. It's just it's all horrific, right? It's just that I didn't want to say the words. I didn't want to say what it was. It was a way for me to not accept it, right? And so, I knew what happened. But the thing is, that's horrific. And it's like, until I actually started to look at it third party and piece together what happened, I couldn't help but feel like a victim. I couldn't help but feel like, wow, as soon as I started looking at it as a third party and changing the way I felt about myself, I realized that, wow, none of that stuff really, all of that stuff never should have been done to me, right? Never should have been done to my family. Horrific. And, we suffered needlessly because two parents did not get us any help, and they didn't get themselves any help. Really, that was the main thing. They didn't get themselves any help, and so we all suffered, right? And so, but as an adult, I thought, okay, I'm sitting here at the age of 41. I've had a pretty interesting life, and here I'm still wanting to kill myself. What's the real issue? So I needed to start really looking at it from a different perspective in order to allow myself to heal. And it just didn't happen overnight. I did some serious heavy-duty thinking. I'm talking hour after hour. I'm talking day after day, week after week, month after month, of looking into this. And 2 years later, I decided to write it down. So I started writing a public blog. So, journaling is very helpful. I wanted the world to know, so I wrote a public blog. But, I wanted the world to know, what happened to me. I was like, oh, my God, I can't go to my grave with this. Because, that was my little inner child saying, I do count. I do matter. And whether or not my own family believes that or not, because they don't, they still don't, I do. You know what I mean? And I had to really start, because I thought, I've been a fighter my whole life. I've been fighting to stay alive. You know what I mean? Like, honestly, within my home, I certainly was. And fighting to keep other people alive in my own home, fighting to keep my friends alive as a teenager, fighting to, to protect people, fighting, always, trying to be that person, And so obviously I'm a fighter, and I thought, like I've been fighting and fighting and fighting, It's like I can keep fighting, and I can keep working on this healing journey, and I can just keep going and going until I feel better. And I don't care how long it takes me, because it's working, But it certainly didn't happen overnight. This has taken a long time, like 4 years to get where I'm at today. Just a little bit over 4 years, so 4.5, kind of going on 4.5 now. So this is the thing. It doesn't happen overnight, And I think that we have to realize that we have to really change our behaviors. You can't change behaviors overnight. It's taken me a long time just to see what I'm doing, just to see some of these behaviors. And I recognize what I'm doing: self-sabotage, self-injury, taking on a guilt or shame, right? Because, even though, I'll say like, well, I don't take the shame on because it wasn't my fault, I still do things that actually kind of point out that I still am taking on some of the shame, right? Some of the blame for being sexually used and as a child, and that's the thing, it's not how could I be responsible for that? Not my fault, And so I'm learning how to change my behaviors, right? And so this is very important. I love what Robert Burney has to say. I hope you will all go check the rest of this out. www.joy2meu.com/spiritual_integration.html, or just type in joy to you and joy to me and you, or joy to you and me, because that's what he's under, Robert Burney, or type in Robert Burney, Burney, and you can bring up his webpage. And he's got a site index there, and you can scroll through and see all the different categories of what he's got. He's got a whole lot of material there, a lot more than what we're talking about. We're just looking at inner child healing. He's got a lot of stuff there, so be sure and check it out. And have a great day, everybody. If you can't cope, you make sure that you get some help. You make sure that you don't allow yourself to spiral downward and hurt yourself or hurt somebody else. You get some help, right? We are responsible for ourselves now. I can't blame my parents if I go out and hurt somebody right now. It's just my responsibility. I can't blame my parents even if I hurt myself now. My responsibility. We have to allow ourselves to heal. We have to give ourselves permission, and we have to learn how to love ourselves, truly love ourselves, not to pretend, okay, I love myself, right? Well, okay, quote unquote. I used to say that. I didn't believe it. But I said it enough, and I said it enough, and I started looking at my inner child, or my inner children, actually, and I started thinking, I do love myself. Oh, my God, Like, I did not deserve to be treated like that. Not ever, not at all, and nobody does, right? So make sure that you reach out, you get some help, and reach out where you can. Find that help where you can, right? And that's keep looking for those better days, right? Have a great day, everybody. We'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.